Well, hello, and again,
Welcome back.
welcome to the BAP. We may or may not have been broadcasting. I'm not sure. Apparently, my
Your fancy chair's not so fancy now, is it? You can't lean back with your headphones on.
my expansive audio deck was saying there was no sound coming through, but may well have been coming through. So I don't know if we should bore the audience again with.
Well, they've probably been bored for the last listening to us go through that.
Yeah. Basically, I got a new chair. Everyone's impressed. We'll move on.
I mean, some of us were jealous.
Some of us were jealous.
So, Jason, in order to remove douchebags, you were telling us about your experience.
I think they're gone.
Yeah, I think they're gone. Yeah, my Breaking Bad Redux experience, which I thought was fantastic. But as I said, I was saying, I think I missed a few episodes when I watched it first time around because there was definitely a lot more. There was a lot more context and meaning for the last few episodes than what I had before. There was the whole pickup and development of the neo-Nazis, sort of meth dealers, was a bit new to me, which made me realise I'd forgotten a few episodes, I believe. Anyway,
Or not seen.
there was the birth of a new villain within that section, who was it was interesting because they ended up playing Jesse off against this other guy. So Walter White had this other assistant who was one of these white neo-Nazis, and turns out he's a complete psychopath and had no problem just whatever. He was like if Walter White had the perfect sidekick who would just do whatever he said kind of thing. So it's like, this person needs to die. Sure, Mr. White, let's do it. He just leave it to Beaver, goes off and sorts it out. But it was pretty good. It was excellent. It was definitely more powerful seeing it the second time around.
Okay.
And I can thoroughly recommend going back and doing it. But as you were saying, you've seen it, but
Oh, no, I've stopped.
yeah, but you saw the last episode. But this has no meaning if you haven't seen the stages of the degradation.
There were
of
definitely
Walter
bits
White.
that didn't mean anything to me anyway. Like, I stopped even at the start of the third season.
As I said, it's worth seeing. If you at the start of the third season, you didn't even see Gus Fring come to his untimely end.
There's just no redeeming characters. I don't
There
empathize.
are.
I don't relate to people.
I mean, Jesse to some extent is having, but it's worth seeing. It really is worth seeing.
Who's
I mean,
my Winston Zedmore? Who's Mr. Everyman? I'm supposed to sort of
Where's the
put myself
redemption
in.
story?
well, Mr. Everyman was that psycho that I was just telling you who turned up.
Oh,
and ended
like
up-
you say, I'm like a neo-Nazi. Just to have a shaved head, sir. You have one too. Neither of us are Nazis. Let's just
Oh,
get
look,
that
I'm
off
just-
the table.
I'm just telling you who you might identify better with. That's all.
Wow.
But
That's-
it's
yeah.
worth checking out. It's amazing television. It really is worth checking out. But as I said, the fall of Walter White, where it suddenly went from a point somewhere in the second season where you could definitely say, "Oh, this is still Walter White." You know, he's making meth, but he's not a bad guy. He's all right. And I think the episode that probably turned me off and made me sort of miss a whole lot was where he watched a heroin junkie choke to death, and I went, "Yeah, this really did get dark." And suddenly you can't cheer for him anymore. Somehow you managed to go through another two seasons of it, though.
Well, and if that wasn't the final nail in the coffin, when he decides to just run over two dealers in the
I don't have a problem
playground.
with that. Why would you have a problem with that, Franco?
Well,
Yeah,
I mean,
on the way here, in fact, Jason saw a couple of dealers.
but
I mean,
in
this
terms
is-
of Walter White, has
these
pretty
guys
much-
these guys shot a kid. They
Oh, did they?
executed
I
a
can't
child.
remember
Yeah,
what
they executed
they
a
did.
child, which is why Jesse was upset, and he was the one walking towards the dealers.
But that's not why Walter White ran them
no,
over.
Walter White ran him over because he didn't want them to kill Jesse because he
Yeah,
needs Jesse.
self-interest.
Absolutely self-interest.
Yes, that's what I mean.
But let's not cry over two meth dealers
no,
who
it wasn't-
just executed an 11-year-old child.
it wasn't the fact that he murdered two drug dealers per se. It was basically he pretty much said, "I operate for the self-interest of Walter White Incorporated."
Yep.
You know, he
And
didn't
the,
even
and the
blink an eye.
music choice in the last few episodes where he's rolling a drum of money out of the desert, and there's the scoring is really quite well, and the music choices that go along with some of these, totally new appreciation for the show. And I used to think, yeah, well, Breaking Bad is maybe not that amazing, but fuck it is pretty good. And you, because didn't even see. Do either of you watch Better Call Saul?
Yes.
No.
Well, I won't spoil it, but Mike, one of your favorite characters from Better Call Saul, right? The old guy.
Yeah.
There's a whole story arc for him in Breaking Bad, which you probably got to see a little bit of as well. And they definitely made his character in Better Call Saul marry up like seamlessly with his Breaking Bad character as well. It's fantastic. Worth checking out. Going back there again.
So this week we as a trio in various different locations, listened to a Joe Rogan podcast. It's not something we...
Because Jason wasn't on Team Joe. He doesn't like Joe Rogan normally.
Yeah. Well, I mean...
Joe Rogan's problematic, but look, he's a skilled interviewer. He's definitely a skilled interviewer. Absolutely.
Skilled? Don't know. He has
Well,
a
it
style.
may be
He has an
natural.
interesting
It may be a
style.
natural gift.
Yeah.
Like a savant. An idiot savant.
You know, the
But
thing
he's,
is...
he's good. He's a good interviewer. He's a good, relaxed, long-form interview. I mean, long-form
Yeah.
interview. It's the old give
I
him
think-
enough rope thing. Let's keep him in the chair for 3.5 hours and see what they say.
I think by saying
And
that...
see if I can tie it back to MMA being useful in everyone's life.
Which I saw that Sargon tried to do, talking about some MMA type stuff. He wanted to connect with his Joey boy.
Yeah, but I think saying that Joe Rogan is a skilled interviewer overplays who Joe Rogan is. I think it's more fair to say he's interesting, and sometimes he throws interesting spanners into the works, or he has an interesting style of engaging, or his talk fest with giving into his guests. He's not a journalist.
No, but I
No,
mean,
so that's-
his style then it really does present with some actually really good interviews as a result.
Definitely.
So, but as I said, he does usually go that long form. I don't think I've ever seen an interview of his go less than about 45 minutes or something like that.
I'm okay with that, though, because he gives the person
I don't
enough
mind-
time to sort of
Yeah,
cover their position in
But
detail.
3.5 hours with Sargon, I just thought was
Yeah.
a little fucking ridiculous. Right? I mean, the guy doesn't have that much material.
Well,
He
he
really does.
went for the 3.5 hours.
No, but he repeated a lot of it, which is why I got called out on one particular element, because he was just constantly fucking claiming victimhood.
Well, and by that long form, no one can ever claim that they were taken out of context, because Joe gives them a long time to set up whatever
Has
context
he ever had
they
Sam
need.
Harris on there?
He has,
Mhm.
and he does have a bit of a love-in with Sam.
I was just wondering if if Sam was on there long enough to take anything at all out of context. But basically, if you talk at all about Sam Harris, then you're taking him out of context.
Sam House is
So-
a bit more skilled at dealing with interviewers to not get caught out as easily as
He gets caught out pretty easy a lot of the time, though.
Sam Harris.
Yeah, I reckon so.
He does, but Joe's not up there with the pantheon of skilled journos or interviewers.
I genuinely enjoy Joe Rogan. He reminds me a little bit of Louis Theroux. Louis gives people silence and they awkwardly fill it with stuff that maybe they shouldn't have said.
Yeah.
And Joe just keeps agreeing with them and like helping them move forward with their point until they go into the same trap.
But when Joe agrees with them, I think he genuinely agrees with
Yeah,
them.
that's my problem with Joe, is that sometimes when he's pulling all this information out of him, he's totally on board with some of this bullshit that they're presenting.
Yeah, but
which-
you would
that's my problem
You would
with
have come
Joe
across
Rogan.
it in the Sargon of Akkad interview where he's agreeing. He's like, well, hang on.
Yeah, and then he pulls them up on something like that. But for the most part, the whole the gender diversity in wages and stuff like that, discrepancy in wages and stuff. He's the one that thinks there's a big operation out there to make people believe stuff that isn't really happening and stuff.
Maybe. I mean, I don't know what it's like in the MMA world where he has his experience. Maybe in the MMA scene, it's not. I don't know. Maybe if the women had MMA training, it would enrich their lives.
It would actually be interesting to someone interview Joe and get a bit of background of what's his approach to interviews. What is he trying to achieve? Is he like where Louis Theroux goes out there and say, I basically want to present the person as who they are and make me as little as possible as part of that process. It's all about them. They reveal who they are on their own terms rather than me trying to paint them in the corner or anything.
Yeah, it's true.
I push and probe. But
I get
it's
you
not
saying,
about
yeah.
me. And I wonder if Joe intentionally, is that what he's trying to do? Or is
I don't know if he might be. He might be trying to direct them towards certain topics and then get more information out of them about it. I certainly feel like he gets to interesting points in conversations.
Definitely, but
But
I'm
he might
wondering
be
how
guiding
he
it quite a
gets
bit.
there. Is he just a stoner who loves having a chat and a yarn?
I think a
and
lot
he's
of it
just
is that.
principled, and that when someone hits on his potential bugbears, he doesn't have it, or does he actually intend? Does he plan it out? Does he have a certain angle he wants to expose, and he does this meticulous planning, or is it all happenstance? He just wants to have a good time, and if it gets controversial, it gets controversial.
Yeah,
That might be it.
he might have some bullet points that he's got to hit on or something like that. But
Oh,
it doesn't sound
definitely.
like. But it does. Every time I've seen it, it has felt like a very free form kind of format. So. Yeah, my only disagreement with this most recent one is I just think he spent 3.5 hours on someone who simply didn't deserve that amount of time.
I don't know. I think
You don't know?
I think Sargon has quite a following, right? There's a lot of people out there
Yes.
that follow him, that listen to him, that think he's an interesting person. He does a lot of videos on YouTube, and he he impacts a lot of people. So I think he is worth the time to sort of show how little depth there is in some places, maybe how much he's
At what point did you stop
chastised. I listened to the whole thing.
3.5 hours.
3.5 hours. Yeah, I listened to the whole thing.
And you can honestly say it was worth it. Like,
yeah, I think it was good. I think it was a great interview.
I should go.
I mean,
listen,
I watched the YouTube. I watched the YouTube version, so I had all the visuals.
Should I listen to the second half, the last hour and a half?
Yeah, I reckon it's good. I reckon it's good both from the perspective of seeing Joe Rogan talk and interview someone, and also because of the stuff Sargon says, which is quite inflammatory. Some of it's a little funny. They talk about PewDiePie in the middle. I don't know if you got to that bit.
Yeah, I saw that bit,
which I thought was quite interesting. And the sheer number of followers he has versus someone like the Washington Post has. Like it's just an interesting analysis in some parts about.
Would you watch
media.
another 3.5 hour interview with Sargon?
I watch Joe Rogan podcasts all the time. Would
you watch another?
I listen to some of Sargon's videos, so yeah, I would.
Wow,
I would
I'm a little bit staggered because, some of the choice of viewing that you would definitely say you wouldn't see again, but you spend 3.5 hours.
See,
as I said, I'll go back and.
I'm a big believer in if you hold an opinion, it's important to challenge yourself by listening to the other side. And I think that Sargon is the other side of a lot of my opinions.
3.5 hours of it, though.
One of the interesting things I think they touched on, and it was showed Joe's failings, more than he wasn't well versed on the topic they touched, was the PewDiePie section. And Joe obviously didn't know a lot about what the controversy was, and Sargon was, bleating on that he was eviscerated by the mainstream media. And basically what it came down to is PewDiePie was trying to illustrate that you can pretty much pay people to do the most ridiculous things. But it was the example he chose that he was criticised for, which was basically the site's called.
To be fair, he was called out by the Washington Post as being anti-Semitic, and there was nothing about his video that was. It was a couple of seconds of him joking around, and one of the bits they sample is actually him saying people will use this out of context.
Yeah,
and then he went out and said,
"But my argument to that is
PewDiePie says
like if a race, like I'm not saying PewDiePie is anti-Semitic, but if someone who's genuinely anti-Semitic goes, someone's going to quote take this out of context. Sometimes the context is correct. In this case, he was just making a joke, and he could have made the same point with a different joke.
Yeah,
but it was
chose
unfortunate.
a very almost taboo subject, getting some people in Africa to hold up a sign saying, what was it, kill all Jews or death to all Jews? It's like,
something along those lines,
You could have made that exact same point with a plethora of examples, but you chose a
and
very
he even said himself,
point
I didn't think they'd do it.
Yeah.
Well, whether you believe it or not, but that's what he said.
Given that there's a lot of European countries that still have an ongoing problem with anti-Semitism, it's pretty naive to think, people will see the point I'm making and set aside any assumptions that I'm anti-Semitic.
But I also think that the counterpoint is important here, because a lot of the things that Israel does, which are complete bullshit, when someone calls them out on it, they go, well, you're just being anti-Semitic. It's like, no, actually, I think Israel basically fencing off the Palestinians and starving them to death, and that's bullshit. And I think it's important to sort of challenge this social norms. Like, why is it always you can't say this, you can't say that? Which is what I find interesting about Sargon and his videos.
Well, how does
I don't agree with it, but it's interesting.
Death to all Jews
does not make your point.
That is
Israel.
an anti-Semitic.
I understand that. Yeah.
Like criticizing Israel or Zionism in general or something, that's a different thing. That's an ideology you're criticizing. It's a different thing. So he could have said that death to Zionists. He might have got a few people agreeing with him on that one. Something like that, you know what I mean?
You got to remember, PewDiePie's not that old either. Like he might not make the most nuanced arguments. Also, his native language is not English.
Anyway, but I mean, even he agreed it was in poor taste after the fact and said...
Yeah, and look, I mean, we're probably not...
Well, that's because he had a Disney sponsorship he lost, so he probably was looking to appease the sponsors a little.
But you don't think he genuinely believed it was in poor taste?
Oh, I think he probably did, but he does plenty of stuff in poor taste.
Yeah, but so he said it, and it was just to appease. It wasn't because he genuinely thought it was in poor taste. I
think he knew it was in poor taste and didn't care until all of a sudden he lost his funding. Then maybe he cared that he lost his funding. I don't think he cared
was
that
happy
it was
to
in poor
say
taste.
That it was in poor taste. Just happy to say that.
I don't know. Sometimes when people apologize and there's money involved with why
you're saying they don't mean it sometimes.
Yeah, I don't think he does. I mean, I make plenty of bad taste jokes that I'm not sorry about because it's intended as a joke. And if someone takes it the wrong way, oh well, they take it the wrong way. I also wouldn't make a YouTube video like he made, though. So, I mean, there's that.
Well, you're not getting paid a lot of money for your poor taste jokes either.
neither-
so-
That's true.
He's not getting paid. I mean, if you got anything like that, people have had to modify their subject headers from now on their videos because anything remotely looking controversial gets demonetized immediately. And that was one thing also that happened to PewDiePie. Someone who has 22 million followers or something like
53.
that. 53.
They talked about that on the Joe Rogan show as well.
And,
Monetization of YouTube.
and he obviously, YouTube income was probably a big chunk of that. So
Joe even talked about it. It was interesting. Sometimes if they just change the header of their video,
yeah.
it's fine.
Yeah.
They just go through and rename it. The content's the same. They just rename it because the title is unfit for advertising. No one actually watches the video, which is in itself a little bit bullshit too.
I also had one of our other podcasts where they were talking about how certain videos had been demonetized. They had someone call in and said they actually someone who places ads with YouTube, and they specifically said they wanted to advertise on this channel. I think it was Majority Report. They were talking about it specifically, and they were told that no, we could not monetize. Even when they were asked to have certain videos, they could put their ads on certain videos. YouTube was turning around at that time and telling them, no, you cannot. We don't allow any monetization of those videos at all. So even if the advertiser themselves was making that choice. Because this is what the problem was, is YouTube got busted because essentially they were allocating advertising for companies based algorithmically and not checking what the material
The content was, yeah.
And so some of them got aligned with PewDiePie's video, which looked, superficially like it might be problematic and cause an issue. But
I mean, you're still reaching 53 million young kids who predominantly don't watch television these days. So I don't think it's a bad thing.
young kids, I'm a subscriber. Are you just erasing me, Dean? I'm a PewDiePie subscriber, and you just
Really?
The demographics for his subscription.
You're one of the 53
trend,
million?
trend younger.
It's not hard.
Wow.
Man. It's not a hard bar to go.
Wow.
He genuinely has some interesting things to say. It's not all scare
It's
shots.
not all about
No.
anti-Semitism?
No, it's not all anti-Semitism. and
It's
it's not all
mostly
scare
video
shots on
games.
video
Yeah.
games.
Yeah.
But there is genuinely other stuff he'll talk about. He's an interesting guy.
Interesting, wealthy guy.
I'm not disagreeing. Yeah, well,
He's very.
he's doing all
wealthy
right. He's doing all right.
Yeah.
But I mean, the other thing that they talked about there, which was a little bit bullshit, is the Washington Post and their behavior in this instance anyway, like going after PewDiePie, taking it directly to his sponsors at Disney without broadcasting it, deliberately trying to create a story.
Yeah, I don't know how much of this was thought through. I mean, a lot of online sort of YouTube-based news organizations and things like Young Turks and that said they've had a noticeable reduction in income. Whether this is like major sponsors and big mainstream media going, we'll do this, we'll pull the trigger on this kind of thing, and if it damages online news content, then big whoop, doesn't matter to us at all, kind of thing, because they've already got their
But
platform.
I mean, it's a weird. I mean, because what would you imagine the Washington Post publishes? Do you read the Washington Post?
No.
I'm thinking business news. I'm thinking share markets.
Business, formal,
Yeah, right. I'm not thinking
politics.
blacklisting a YouTube broadcaster who targets children for his videos. I don't think that's the kind of thing that I would normally expect the Washington Post to publish stories about. What is interesting, though, is that they have about 1/50th of the subscribers he has. So you have a whole bunch of younger audiences now who probably don't like the Washington Post because PewDiePie says they're bad people.
Potentially.
So they
But-
might be on their way to obsolescence.
But also, I imagine that that would be our stereotypical assumption of who the Washington Post is. But obviously, they need to target younger audience to replace their aging and diminishing audience. So they probably thought, well, maybe if we can sort of get more of a huge mainstream article about a YouTube channel that is being has a deal with Disney but has anti-Semitic comments, whew, maybe
Yeah.
a story.
I still think they're probably more likely trying to target the parents of those kids.
I think
than
it's
they are the kids.
it's currently owned by Jeff Bezos as well. I think.
YouTube.
No,
Washington
Washington Post. It's been a bit of a partisan rag for a long time. I remember it's one of those ones you tend to dismiss because it's usually just pro-Republican and just talking points. It's not terribly imaginative. I was just trying to think that if there was a good journalist on there that I actually read, but there's none on the Washington Post.
Well, there we go. Continue the journey to obsolescence.
So I'm going to make a call that we've been pretty douchey in the douchebag filter, bringing some pretty heavy topics. So I'm going to lighten the mood.
Sure.
This year marks the 20th anniversary of one of my all-time favourite sci-fi movies ever. Big call. French movie by Luc Besson, The Fifth Element.
I just rewatched that last night.
You did. So that was very foolish of you to do it last night. Because the reason I'm bringing this up is because they did a 4K remaster that they're showing in cinemas.
Oh, really?
And it hits Perth cinemas for a very limited showing in August. So I invite you gentlemen to attend with me when I go.
Yeah, let's do it.
This is still the biggest European movie to be released. I think it was made for 90 million in 1996 and grossed 260 million. It's a Luc Besson movie starring Bruce Willis, Gary Oldman,
Yeah, we do like
very
Gary.
notable, Mila Djokovic, Chris Tucker.
Yep.
And one of the amazing things I always felt was the costumes by Jean-Paul Gaultier.
Yeah, Jean-Paul. When we were watching it, Mari actually, I go,
didn't
hey,
know- I
watch
didn't
this,
know it was
check this
JPG.
movie, man. It's one of my favourite movies. And she's going, it's science fiction. And then she's looking at the credits roll past. She goes, Jean-Paul Gaultier, just the costume. She goes, this is worth checking out just to see what he does.
Yeah, it's
And
a
it was.
visual feast.
Yeah, nice. I didn't know that. That makes sense.
Apparently, Luc Besson started writing this movie when he was 16, the script for it, as an escape. But it didn't get released until he was 38, so it was quite a journey. He's obviously famous for movies.
Actually, I was wondering whether it was based on any source material, but it's his own story, basically.
Well, I don't know if it's obviously drew inspiration from Blade Runner. You can sort of see that in that sort of interpretation
The
of
world
the
building,
dystopia world. Well, not dystopia, but yeah, that sort of
Blade Runner, perhaps Brazil.
yeah.
A bit of Brazil. Yeah, it's fantastic, and it's because there's a certain absurdist quality to it. It's not hardcore sci-fi.
No,
There's a certain amount of absurdism
and a sort of extrapolation of where corporatism would go to in 1,000 years' time.
Jean-Baptiste
We're
Emmanuel
not-
Zorg.
We're not heading towards the Star Trek utopia. We're more heading
No.
towards the Luc Besson corporatist world. Maybe not as good looking though. We've got Jean-Paul Gaultier. Luc Besson made such movies as Taken, Old Man Fighting.
Oh, is that one of his?
Yes, Ong Bak, The
He's done some
Transporter,
good films.
and Nikita. He's made a lot of lemons as well.
The
unfortunately.
Professional?
I don't think
Isn't that
that's
Luc
his.
Besson? Wasn't that the...
You got a laptop in front of you. You could just Google that.
Yeah, I didn't see that in the listing, but he's
Oh,
made a lot of
no.
movies, a lot of lemons, unfortunately. But there are some of the notable ones I
I
saw.
figured
there.
though, sometimes you have your personal projects, of which this obviously was one,
Yeah,
and then other times it's just a paycheck.
because I looked through his listing of movies and nothing sort of stood out there where it said, "Oh, okay, so that's obviously followed on from what he did from The Fifth Element." I'm not talking sequence, but in terms of just a wow factor of
Yeah.
Yeah, The
Nothing else.
Professional. Leon the Professional.
oh, yeah.
That was awesome, that movie.
It was.
He also did Taken 2. And Transporter 2.
I'm disappointed they didn't call it Taken 2 Retaken.
I mean,
And then Taken 3, I don't know what you're going to call it, but they should have done like subtitles for those.
yeah. I'm just...
Or Taken 3, this is getting ridiculous.
because he's got a large writer credit on a lot of movies.
Mm.
Director.
Yeah, right.
Valerian, The Family, The Lady...
The Valerian, there, yes. That's it's coming out soon.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I'm not familiar with it.
I saw the
So,
previews. I wasn't overwhelmed.
Were you just whelmed?
Joan of Arc
Wild.
was another Mila Djokovic one.
Yeah, I didn't bother with that.
It was... meh. Then it was Leon, then The Fifth Element. So he did Fifth Element straight after Leon the Professional. And Nikita.
That's not a bad follow-up, is it? Because The Professional was amazing.
Yeah.
And then you're like, I've got this little pet project. Let me make it for 90 million. Done. And then pretty much you can do what you want.
But it seems like after The Fifth Element, which seems to be the epoch of his career, everything else from there was...
Yeah, what did he
He
go?
did make some good stuff.
It happens to people. I mean, and you got to bear in mind, if he spent 16 years working on that project, it was probably bound to be good. The next project he doesn't have 16 years of his time invested into it. He's got a year
Yeah,
or two.
I'm telling you now, it doesn't have a lot of good stuff after.
There's a lot of... Wow.
Look at
A
it.
lot of movie number 5.
And he didn't direct Transporter, he wrote and stuff. There's a lot of writing credits he's got
Yeah, well, that's all right.
taken.
Maybe he's a script doctor as well. Maybe he didn't write them. He's just got a credit because he was like fixing someone's badness.
Could be, yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, I'm looking forward to that in August. So
Yeah,
I'll
cool.
keep you gentlemen apprised of that showing because it'd be interesting to see the restoration to 4K, whatever that means.
I haven't got a TV that would deal with 4K, so I'd have to go to the screen.
I got one.
Funnily enough, I've got one. I think. Funnily enough, they haven't called it a director's cut, so I don't think there'll be any new footage by the sounds of it.
That's probably good. I don't. It depends. Things like Blade Runner, where they've released like 8 or 9 fucking cuts, like with a couple. Like I don't. I just. It's fine. It's just leave it. Just leave it. It's done. Move on.
And Fifth Element's not some kind of. It's not a Blade Runner exactly. It's a great movie, but
there's no missing pieces. You know.
Yeah, it's not
Blade
leaving,
Runner was very esoteric. There were things that were going, oh, I don't understand.
doesn't leave you hanging.
Some of the different cuts had different endings. And it's like, well, okay.
Is he an android? Is he not? Who can tell? I don't know. What is that?
The point of the
what
film?
does that bit of origami mean?
Well, I always felt
It's the same with Inception. Was he dreaming still?
Yeah. It's still spinning. It's still spinning.
All right, boys. Newsies. What have we got?
Look, I got one. This was my the big story of the week for me was about Christopher Pine.
That was one of my stories, but you take it.
So it's a little bit funny that yet again a sort of private Liberal Party function has had someone record and leak audio from it.
Mm-hmm.
So this happened to Malcolm Turnbull when he was telling jokes at the Winter Ball, and now it's happened to Christopher Pine when he's having a couple of beers. He was having some cooling ales and a bit of a
Christopher
chat.
Pine, a Turnbull, staunch Turnbull.
Very much so.
Right.
Christopher Pine is...
So the leaks seem to be coming from one side
Christopher
of...
Pine is one of the moderate members of the Liberal Party, and he part of the leak was that he has voted for Malcolm Turnbull in every leadership ballot to date.
Right.
He also leaked that so has George Brandis, who is actually a part of the moderate faction of the Liberal Party. I did not know this. He doesn't strike me as a moderate man, but apparently moderate.
Of moderate intelligence, yes.
But so Christopher Pine was having a couple of beers and a bit of a chat with some people and welcoming him to the Victors Club. He was suggesting that the moderate faction of the Liberal Party was currently dominant and in charge, and that they could achieve the things they want to achieve, including, very soon, a free vote on same-sex marriage.
Woo.
So someone leaked this to the press, and immediately the Conservatives within the party started calling for Christopher's job. They wanted him sacked as the manager of government business in the House. Thankfully, a lot of people rallied around him to say that was ridiculous, including Scott Morrison. I don't think George Brandis had anything to say.
We won't go.
But part of the deal was
Pine
that
is so fine.
Christopher Chris had to apologise for his remarks.
First time ever, apparently.
Yeah.
In politics,
the
in 20 odd years, first time he's actually come out and apologised for anything.
The man who can fix anything couldn't fix this. So he's come out. He's apologised if he offended anyone with his remarks. He didn't apologise for what he said, but he apologised if anyone's taken offence.
It was one of those apologies.
No, it's the kind of
I
apology I would
apologise
give.
if anyone took offence. That's not an apology.
And he did one
But
of those.
why would you be sorry about equal rights? You're not going to be like, yeah, I'm
Not
wrong.
really.
They're not equal.
Yeah, he's not really so. He's doing the I apologise if anyone
Well,
was
he spoke
offended.
with forked tongue as well because he goes, I support the government's position on it and I also support marriage equality.
Yeah.
Which
Look,
I know
So
confuses
what's
me.
behind all these leaks?
That's what has me curious.
I mean,
And then Tony Abbott has once again
yeah, this is where I was going.
been in the press. I'm suspecting maybe it was a Tony loyalist in both situations. But Tony seems to be content to watch the party burn. He's not going to get back in charge.
Nope.
Are you sure about that?
No, I'm not sure.
I mean, he seems to be. He's hanging around, and
But Tony's doing what Tony does. It's not like, even if he wasn't going for the top job, this is what Tony would be doing. He has this ideological bent.
I'm right.
I'm right because I'm on the right.
I mean, one of the articles I was bringing up was talking Malcolm Turnbull saying he would leave Parliament if he was forced to stand down as Prime Minister, and it was all in the background of Tony Abbott just sniping away.
Tony's got nowhere to go. That's the problem.
Yeah. He said he's actually saying he understood why Tony had found it difficult adjusting to life as a backbencher because he went through a bleak period himself when he lost the Liberal Party leadership to Abbott in 2009.
Yeah.
So he's just, there's still so much tension going on there.
There is that. The media is enabling Tony Abbott.
Yeah.
They give him print
It's
space.
a good
Do
story.
you know who else they were enabling? Do you see Corey Bernardi on
Yes,
Sky
I
News?
did. Not surprising.
So Sky gave Corey a platform to basically preach to all the Liberal Party voters in South Australia, where Christopher Pine is from, where Corey Bernardi is from, that if they don't like Pine's views on marriage equality, that they could always vote for the Australian Conservatives. He actually said it in a far nastier way than that, but that's the thrust of what Corey was saying.
Yeah, if the
Corey pretty much asserted that Christopher Pine was duplicitous.
Thing is, he's not.
No?
Like, his position has been well known. I posted this on our little Facebook page, and then I posted articles back from 2015 and interviews from 2015. He was one of the only 2 members of the government front bench to stick around for Warren Entsch's backbench bill about a free vote on same-sex marriage. He didn't vote for it, nor did Malcolm Turnbull, the only other person present, but they did sit there in silence and be present while the rest of the party fucking walked out of the chamber. So, I mean, as much as I don't agree with Christopher Pine politically a lot of the time, he is a man of principle, and he has long been a supporter of same-sex marriage. I watched a really interesting interview with him when he put his book out, which I have no intention of buying or reading. I may do so now. I didn't at the time, where he was talking about that he came around from when he was talking to same-sex couples in his electorate who were adopting kids and raising kids and giving them the opportunities of a stable family that these kids otherwise never would have had. And it seems a bit bullshit to deny people the right to just be a family. So he was something of a convert to the cause, and he's been championing it within the Liberal Party, which can't have been an easy time.
No, certainly not when Abbott was there.
No. So, I mean, look, thankfully the guy's got to keep his position of power, keep his job, keep his influence. Maybe he can fix this. He is the fixer.
It is interesting you mentioned that Chris's opinions changed when he actually came into contact with real people from the LGBT community. This was a point that Sam Cedar was making on the Majority Report, that in their politics in America, that from the Republicans and to some extent the Democrats, that those who share positions favourable to the LGBT community are those who in their own life have experience with people either through relatives or friends or whatnot, have contact with somebody from the LGBT community, which softens their stance on policies which affects those groups.
Yeah. I mean, this is true of any sort of political advocacy for equal rights, though. Anyone who is on the side of championing those who don't have rights generally has become exposed to people and gone, the situation you're in is bullshit, and I want to help out.
Yeah.
But look, it was interesting to see, and I was really kind of worried that maybe Turnbull, the spineless man that he is, would throw Pine to the dogs. But he didn't.
Well, I mean, Christopher would be one of his strongest supporters. I don't think he'd be in a position to throw Chris out.
He can't throw anyone out.
What I found interesting was Chris was willing to show such a favour to Turnbull to actually apologise. It must have been a big call for him because it's an issue he feels strongly about. He's been out there for a very long time having this position, and having to apologise must have cut deep for him. Must have been a very big favour for Malcolm.
Yeah, probably. I mean, again, I think it shows good strength of character when someone actually will front up and apologise for something, even if they don't think they've done anything wrong. Like, I kind of like Chris more than I like any of the other members of the coalition. Have done for a while. Julie Bishop's all right. It's a very small list.
It's a very small, but it's no bigger on the other side.
I like Warren Entsch.
Yeah, I like Warren Entsch as well. He's good.
I don't know.
It's actually a bigger list in the coalition for me. I like Penny Wong, Tanya Plibersek, and that's about it. Federal Labor.
Okay, and yeah, Federal Labor. Yeah, it certainly isn't Bill Shorten, but if you don't mind me segueing,
segue away.
Bill Shorten clearly is trying to tune into some populist sort of
He's
politics.
Not gonna, though, is he?
He is
got
trying
a punchable face.
He's trying to. So Bill Shorten is standing by his vow to reverse the decision to cut Sunday penalty rates for some workers, saying he would reinstate the cuts within 100 days of taking office should he win the federal election. This is him. He's trying to Corbyn it up. He wants to be a bit of a jezzer.
You know the problem with this?
He's got no credibility.
It's not the lack of credibility. The problem I have with this
I think it might be.
is that the Fair Work Council Board, whatever it is called, was established by the Labor Party, admittedly stacked by the coalition to get the outcome they wanted. But it's supposed to be an independent board that the government just takes advice from and acts accordingly. They established this board, and now they're like, well, we're not going to listen to this case. Once you disregard them on one case, the coalition will do it on other cases. Like, you're just setting yourself up. Well, this should become irrelevant.
Yeah, well, they set up a board that, as you said, was stacked stacked completely to deliver an outcome that the Conservatives wanted.
Yep.
There's no point adhering to a board if it's going to be like that. I mean, what's the point of having it? You're just doing yourself damage.
But that's look,
What, do you just unilaterally disarm?
This is what's happening now, right? They're making it look like there's no point having this board, so they'll get rid of them.
There is a point of having them.
No, I know that, but by disregarding them now, if the Labor Party get into power, they'll afford the coalition the position.
Yeah,
of going,
well, I mean,
if
as
you're
I
not
said-
going to listen to them,
As I said, they have no credibility. This is specifically. It would have to take a huge shake-up in the Labor Party to get. I can't see them. Every time I see a populism advancing on the left in other countries, I'm looking at our left, and all I see is Bill Shorten there, and a very short sort of list of people that might be worth supporting in the Labor Party.
Anthony Albanese is all right.
But
There you go. I've just evened the list up. He's all right.
But what? None of them are going to champion most of these hardcore sort of left causes or anything like that. They're not really. That's not who the Labor Party is. And to be honest, the Greens aren't a whole lot better in many aspects either. So it's, I don't know. You get this. Would I rather the Labor Party disavow this committee that they
Council,
made,
yep.
or just go along with it? That I don't know. I'd rather them just disavow it, I think, and just say this is a failed experiment. We need to move on.
But then you'll never get it back, and the government will be able to set whatever policy they want around workers' rights.
Yeah. Well, what are they? They're going to set the policy they want anyway.
I think you need to ensure the independence of the body.
Fantastic. It's a
And
great
then-
idea.
and
but it
then have
sounds
them
like that-
decide another way.
Sounds like that horse is
And-
already bolted, right?
And the other thing to bear in mind is maybe penalty rates do need reform anyway. Maybe Sundays shouldn't be paid
Maybe
at different
they
rates
do,
to Saturdays and
but,
Friday nights, for example. Maybe it should all be paid at time and a half. Or
maybe it
there's-
should do, but
there's
as
a lot
I
of
said,
discussion to be had
if
around
there's no
this.
independent panel to assess it, then what are we getting? We're not getting anything.
Yeah.
It's a big step in the wrong direction.
Look, Shorten's never going to win. He might win because Turnbull loses,
Yeah.
and that's the only way he's going to win. Quotation fingers around that.
But I mean, I've been following the tweets. He's definitely trying a more populist message lately, which they didn't seem to be attempting almost at all before.
The ridiculous thing about this is when Trump was popular, he was trying to be like Trump. Now, when Corbyn's popular, he's trying to be like Corbyn. Just get a fucking personality of your own
Yeah.
and use that.
Well,
I know he
but-
doesn't have one, but like, just stop.
The
being...
other thing is the thing that your Trumps and your Corbyns and your Sanders and that have, which work for them, and
fucking principles.
is well, I mean, Trump, we wouldn't say principles. There's something about there's a level of consistency to it. They've all been saying the same thing. In the case of Trump, it's the same bullshit for fucking 30 years or 40 years. But in the case of Sanders and Corbyn, they've been promoting those policies that they're now
for a long
getting
time.
a chance. They've been putting up there for a long time. For Shorten to just jump in and go, hey, now I'm for the workers, now I'm for the blue class workers, even though he's been in the Labor Party all this time.
And the union movement.
No
all the
one's
time.
buying it. No one's really buying it, right?
It's because of the messenger. It's not the message that's
No,
the
exactly.
problem.
That's exactly right. But the whole Labor Party's tarred with that brush to some extent at the moment. It's like the Democratic Party in America. There would need to be a big shake-up for people to suddenly believe that it is actually a working class party again. It just feels like it's New Labour. It's New Labour from the UK, kind of very pro-corporate, pro-business.
Yeah.
With just lip service to their union sort of
Roots.
which are gradually
Even then,
disappearing.
it is mostly about the rich cities that prosper. Most of the borders, the coastal cities that are well off, prosper under democratic governments, and then working class societies struggle. Which is why the firewall turned against them, because there are no jobs. You're not looking after people. There haven't been jobs when you've been in power.
That's not necessarily anything to do with democracy specific.
No, the Democrat Party. I'm faulting they lost those votes because they did nothing to ensure that they maintained them while Obama was in power. They just ignored it. And it's not so much that Trump was the more appealing option. It's just that he was the someone else, I feel.
Which is exactly, as you said, how Shorten may end up winning this next election.
Yeah.
Simply because he's not Turnbull or Abbott or Christopher Pine.
Or whoever's in charge at the time. Or Peter Dutton is the conservative man of
I
choice.
saw a photo of
to lead the party.
him standing next to Turnbull, and I'm going, he does not look like a prime minister. I don't know, but then
He just
Tony
looks
Abbott
confused a lot of the time.
Yeah, he does have that slack-jawed sort of mouth breather quality, doesn't he?
So I had another big story this week. George Pell has been released by the Pope to come back to Australia to face charges for sexual assault. He's due to face court, I think it's the 18th of July, if I remember correctly.
Doesn't have any medical issues that would preclude him from flying as he's had in the past.
I think he still has them, but
Yeah.
he has to answer charges.
I do remember some reporter doing. This is something we've learned to look out for at our places when they do live crosses and whether they're worth being live for. And someone they were standing outside George Pell's apartment, going yes, but of course there's no comment from George Pell. Any of these questions will be answered by his legal personnel or his medical personnel. So they're obviously keeping that medical line open.
Yeah,
for certain excuses.
Well, I mean, historically they wanted George to come back and give evidence. This is now to defend charges against himself.
Yeah.
The other very interesting thing that happened today, and I'm not going to comment on an ongoing case because it's just he's been charged. Let's let justice serve its course. But the other really interesting thing, Pope Francis this morning fired the Catholic Church's the man in the Catholic Church who was in charge of sexual assault abuse cases. That's interesting, right?
Very interesting.
I'm not saying they're related. It's just you don't like. He's been let go.
I wonder who who placed him in his position. Was it the previous Pope? I don't know.
I'm not. Yeah. No.
The guy who was in charge of
because I don't even know the guy's name.
Because the previous Pope was that guy who was in charge of looking into these things at one stage. He was the enforcer and supposedly, I guess it's internal affairs. Is there a CSI?
Papal Justice.
CSI Vatican coming up or something like that?
Yeah. Well, look. I mean, so it's pretty interesting. I'm a little worried though that, and as much as I thought the Tim Minchin song was very funny, that it may sort of pollute a lot of the jury pools and stuff. Like people will sort of have an opinion of George Pell that is negative to start with, rightly or wrongly. I mean, I haven't really enjoyed him since he used to be on Q&A when he was representing the Catholic Church at that point. But yeah, so that's one to watch anyway. Could be huge.
I'm just reading a news article in regards to the German Cardinal Gerhard Müller, who was the individual that was
formerly in charge.
His contract was not renewed for the position. So
you know what that language means.
Yes, he was replaced with his 73-year-old deputy, Spanish Jesuit Monsignor Luis Lariada Ferrer.
Getting some new blood in.
Yeah. Hey, look, if there's anyone that's good at performing an inquisition and burning heretics, it's the Spaniards.
No official reason was given as to why his contract was not renewed. However, it may people believe it may have been due to the 2,000 cases of sexual abuse that had amassed as a backlog during his 5-year term.
Wow.
Wasn't making progress.
An inbox, but the outbox was not getting filled.
No, apparently not.
It's a bit rough for an organisation like the Catholic Church to try and recover from scandal after scandal after scandal.
It's been continual for a
long while now. Yeah, it's been continual.
2,000 years. Yeah.
Rough. So it'll be interesting to see how they handle this as well.
I have some local yokel news. Something that piqued my curiosity when I was reading The Worst, or should I say The West Australian, was business editor Ben Harvey, economic genius, apparently, wrote an opinion piece calling for Mark McGowan to backflip on his election promise not to sell off Western Power. He was making a sort of piece saying, well, politicians, change their positions, given the facts on the ground. He was citing how Mark McGowan's been whining that he's had to make certain steps due to how bad the budget was.
Mm-hmm.
And Ben was saying that it makes obvious sense to sell off Western Power because you get a potential $11 billion hit to the deficit. We can bring it down by $11 billion. That's a bit of a flawed reasoning because there's no government that would ever come to power, sell off such a massive asset and use the full proceeds to bring down the debt.
No.
There's got to be some pork barreling there.
No.
And what annoys me is that this guy's not an economist. What's he advocating? There's no sense. The West Australian people have spoken and said, we're not geniuses, but we don't think it's a good idea to sell a major asset like that and give it to the hands of...
There's enough people that are alive that remember numerous parts of our privatisation over the last 30 years and how nearly every time every utility got more expensive and the service deteriorated. It was just the...
Well, because all of a sudden there are profit margins that are important.
Yeah. And people are alive who still remember that shit, and they're trying to ignore it and pretend it never happened.
But in his clumsy article, he doesn't provide any examples as to how we would benefit as a society. But I mean, he tries to make the argument that the way the Western Power is a declining asset. Basically, people are going to be moving to solar power, and so we're going to be left with no value in our asset. I didn't put it that strongly, but it, but it never put any sort of counter to what we would do to prevent private industry jacking up prices.
The problem is with that argument that he's making is that if an idiot who's writing for a newspaper thinks it's a declining asset, anyone with financial resources to the point where they could buy Western Power would see the same thing. They're not going to offer you market value because they'll be like, no, that's a declining asset. I'm not going to give you 11 billion. Solar.
Yeah. That's a model.
Because it's still not dealing with the fundamental issue of why we have a $42 billion state debt.
Yeah.
That doesn't fix the budget. It just brings down the value. You still have an inherent problem that you don't earn enough to pay your bills. And like
we do earn enough to pay our bills. We
service the debt.
We get back 34 cents in the dollar from every dollar of GST we pay federally. We earn more than enough to pay our bills. We just lose the money.
Well, we could also put in place, it wouldn't be very popular, but we could do a state tax, special state tax to pay off the debt.
I still am in favour.
Yeah,
I'm still in favour of us just not handing our GST revenue over. What are they going to do?
I don't know.
That's secessionist talk.
I don't know what they do.
No, it's not secessionist talking. It's
actually, the Hutt River Province, the royalty of the Hutt River Province recently received a large tax debt, which they are obviously disputing, saying they've declined to pay for the last 30 years or something like that. But I don't know how the secession thing really works out, because at the moment it doesn't look like it's working out well for him.
I'm not saying we don't we spend the money. I'm saying we decline to pay until we get a better deal. Because the state government's collecting it anyway, and then they hand it over, and then we get back 34 cents a dollar. So just don't hand it over. Delay as long as you can.
Run that 30 days out.
Yeah, run it out, and they send you another notice. What's going on? You're like, well, I didn't get that bad email. Internet. Oh, what are you doing, NBN? Your fault.
It's your NBN. You guys should have put the good one in.
I don't know. I just feel like the fundamental thing that needs to change here is how much money we get back. And no one's willing to negotiate on that, so we don't negotiate either. We just stop paying until they are.
Apparently Scott Morrison sort of feels for our position. He doesn't agree with our parochial position on it, but he agrees with we're not necessarily getting the fair shake of the stick.
Yeah, he does.
Yeah, I'm not certain we need to get all... We need to demand 100%, because clearly there are certain parts of Australia which need more support from us.
I'm down with that, but right now, I mean, if we're talking about selling off major assets just to pay a debt, maybe we should be saying, actually, we're not going to do that. And you're going to have to give us a better deal. And if you can't, well, then we're not going to give you this GHC revenue until we absolutely positively have to. Like you send soldiers in or something to take money from my cold dead hands.
Hang on, the SAS are already here.
Yeah.
Oh, shit.
I don't know. I think that's the thing that needs to change is that piece. Otherwise, you're going to be faced with privatization of assets, depreciation of public services, getting rid of public servants, making unemployment worse.
Let's not forget that this privatisation push would have been there whether there'd been a lack of public debt or not. This is something they've been pushing for a long time. This is just the latest excuse.
No, yeah, it would be there. Yeah.
The other issue that it doesn't deal with is how do you stop governments wasting money on pet projects like football stadiums?
The bigger problem was
Elizabeth Keys.
Those things are fine if the boom continues.
Notice how he diverted from the football stadium discussion immediately. Dean doesn't have a problem with the football stadium.
It's right near my house. It's great.
Why do we have to privatise the needs but not privatise the wants? Why can't private industry build amazing football stadiums? Why do we need a state government to deliver those? Apparently government doesn't deliver good outcomes, so why does the government have to pay for that?
I don't know. Obviously, some people have good friends in high places.
When it comes to utility provision, private industry, free market will do a better job. Football stadiums, no.
They build the football stadium and then allow someone else to profit from it. Yeah.
It does my head in.
They socialise the cost, privatise the profit. And it seems to work out nicely for some people.
I'm not. I don't have a problem with
it. Looking at Dean.
Look, but
he's not getting any of the profit.
If the boom times had continued under Barnett, these projects wouldn't have been a problem. It's only because the iron ore price went down, which meant the revenue we got went down. Our GST revenues have gone down, and all of a sudden they can't service the debts. Now, ideally, governments shouldn't be going and spending in boom times and borrowing heavily, but they do. A nice futures fund would be something to establish, and then live off the interest.
Yeah.
Don't just spend all the extra cash you're getting as if it's going to last forever, because it's not.
But it just goes to show how fucked up our politics, local and federal, is, because there have been propositions to fix these things in the past, super profits tax, just various mechanisms, and these things, they don't get ahead. They don't get ahead in current politics. Because there's too many people in positions of power invested in that kind of solutions not coming forward.
Yeah, no, I agree. It is a hassle.
A hassle.
But it's one you're going to struggle to resolve. The mining company's got very deep pockets, and globally they don't want to have to deal with that. So they'll spend big here.
What else you got, Jason?
Just something.
News me.
Just something. I mean, in Australian politics kind of frustrates the fuck out of me, because you're looking for someone who you might be interested in voting. And I was just reading today. So the Greens, you'd think they'd be fairly united on some things, right?
Is this about the Gonski funding?
Yeah, Lee Rhiannon is being excluded from the party room because she was sending out. As I said, I haven't finished reading this. It just came up today.
No. I actually think that she would be your kind of politician.
Lee Rhiannon?
Yeah.
No.
So you're standing with the moderates rather than the activist.
I'm thinking the party. The odd thing is the party has come to an agreement on a certain thing, but she was fighting it. What they want is the Greens as a whole want the senators to be able to vote their conscience.
Yep.
But under current rules, New South Wales Green senator has to vote what the New South Wales Green Party says. So it's where do you decide to draw that line? So at the moment, Lee Rhiannon says she's got to do what the New South Wales Party tells her to do, which happens to be what she probably agrees with anyway, so it's okay.
It's probably just an excuse, isn't it?
But yeah,
I'd love to vote with you back after party.
That's right. And so I'm not entirely on her side, because I think a conscience vote in any party I think is required. Voting party lines, you can certainly argue for it, but ultimately I think we elect an individual politician and they can vote how the fuck they want. So, being beholden to some party apparatchiks back at a state level seems concerning to me as well.
The interesting thing about our Australian politics is that the Labor Party have to vote along party lines.
Yeah, they've got the caucus.
The Greens also do. The Coalition, Liberal Party, do not. They have conscience votes whenever they want.
Except on gay
marriage. The Greens Party can vote their conscience. It's a party rule, but it's like there's nothing they
can do it, but
yeah. Whereas the Labor Party has a constitution which forces it to some extent because of their Labor roots. So there was the caucus, but I don't think they don't have to vote to the caucus, do they? Their hierarchy in their power structure is selected by the caucus.
I think you could probably not show up for a vote. Like, I had the shits. I couldn't be there. Sorry.
I just said, once you're elected, you're not actually beholden to the apparatus that was behind you.
You won't get pre-selected.
You won't get selected again. But that's how they police that shit, and I've got no problem with that. That's
I already think that Lee Rhiannon's not going to get her selection again.
Yeah,
she was on ABC's Insiders the other night, sort of championing her side of the argument. And bad mouthing Richard Dinnertill.
So basically, as I said, I didn't get to read the whole thing, but their argument was they didn't agree with the Greens compromising at all on this Gonski deal. But I couldn't see what particular, what specific she had a problem with.
No one can, but as far as I'm aware.
Right.
But
it's just the principle of negotiating with the enemy.
Yeah, she doesn't want to negotiate with the enemy. Whereas the Greens are like, hey, the Gonski funding's a good outcome. Yeah. We can make something happen better than nothing, because the Labor Party will not work with the government, and if the Greens don't, it's dead. So the Greens are trying to be pragmatic about this, and some other members are not.
So you think usually I'm siding with the activists, but
no,
not necessarily.
It's just because she happens to be from the far left of the Greens Party. She's got more connections to activist roots. She works with a lot of social activists, a lot of environmental activists, whereas the Greens Party mainstay these days are like, look, that's our roots, but
yeah, and when it comes to that, there's certain things of which you have to draw the line and say we will not go along with certain deals. But in this situation, I don't think that's where the line is. Like,
no, I also think the same is true. This bugged me shit with Tony Abbott, and it still bugs me under Shorten. Just because you're elected to be in opposition doesn't mean you just flat out oppose things. You go with the best deal you can get at the time. right? And if someone's going, hey, we're going to fund education to the tune of $18 billion more and kids are going to get better outcomes, you don't just go, nah, sorry, hey, we're only in if you fund it the whole amount we want to.
It's far too tribalist.
It's just childish
without
bullshit.
without any rationales behind their
Can't let
position.
the opposition get a win mentality.
Yeah, and half the time when they're listing the reasons why they might be against a certain policy, they just look like these manufactured concerns.
Yeah.
Especially when they rabbit on about how we're in it to get the best deal for Australia. Well, that's only if it's the best deal for Party X at the same time.
Yeah. No, and the Labor Party are particularly guilty of that.
Like, I don't remember Bill Shorten. Obviously, they must have crowd tested this or something like that, and all of a sudden he's coming down against the cuts to penalty rates and things like that. I mean, they were saying it beforehand, but this seems like they're arcing up the message again for some reason now. They think they can maybe campaign on it for the election.
I think there's probably some expectation that Malcolm may not last.
Yeah.
Therefore, we might be going back to an election. Therefore, they want to deny the government wins because potentially we'll be campaigning soon. And if Malcolm has nothing to point to as his achievements, which he doesn't really have a lot to,
When's the next election?
it's a while, a couple of years.
When did we have the last one? I can't remember now.
Late last year,
Late last year.
2016. Yeah.
There seems to be far too many of them in the recent.
Sorry,
Wasn't that a
mid-
state election? That was the state government election, wasn't
It's before that because we had
March
we had
was the state government.
we had the
last
year of Abbott, and then we've had
2016, I think it
Yeah.
was.
wasn't a
It's
full
not been
year.
that long.
It wasn't a full year, but it was.
Look, I don't know. The short answer is I don't know. But you've got Google in front of you. It's the second time I've made that joke today. But it is a complete bullshit, and both sides are guilty of this though. I'm actually happy to
Both
at least see
sides
the
do it.
Greens trying
Both
to
sides
negotiate.
do.
Like they're trying to get an
Yeah.
outcome, and if they
Well,
can,
They're
at
trying to
least,
be a real political party.
yeah,
That's
they're at the negotiating table. If they don't like what they see, maybe we walk away. But at least they're there trying.
Yeah.
You know, and it makes a mockery of the system when someone like Pauline Hanson's One Nation is willing to negotiate on an issue, but the Labor Party is not. Do you really want to be in a world where Pauline Hanson is the reasonable person?
Yeah. The trouble is with the small parties can pick and choose which issues they want to negotiate on, and that's all they get tarred with. Whereas Labor Party, I can kind of see it. They've got the whole the whole list of policies they've got to work. They've got to present a position on, or they should be.
Yeah.
And they've got to do it holistically. But
Yeah, so you just look if you're worried about that, when you work with the
Because what
government,
did
you
what
make
did the
sure they
Greens-
present it as a unity position.
what do the Greens negotiate with the Liberal Party on when they got into power last time? With Senator Brown was up there, wasn't he? And they came down on I can't remember what this issue was, but they got absolutely sort of panned for it. And I would have thought they'd be gun shy again, but there's nothing wrong with this kind of deal, the deal they're currently trying to make. So, which is just get the funding for the Gonski. But I mean, you can be purist about it, but that means no one gets any funding for them.
Yeah. And we're sort of heading towards a political age where one party won't dominate the system. You're going to have to negotiate with people. So it's a good thing for parties to get used to this. But I just wish the Labor Party were more open, and the coalition when they're in opposition were more open to it, and just present it as a unity platform. Like we both agree on this. This legislation's good, and we compete on other issues. And education's one of those areas where you're talking about kids' futures.
Yeah.
Do you really want to be the guy that denies children education? Do you want to, like, both of you? Are you that fucking caught up in this tribal bullshit that you can't even agree that, hey, let's get good outcomes for kids?
Apparently.
It irritates me. Yeah, no, apparently they are. And Abbott did this with the Gonski funding previously as well.
Yeah.
Like both of them have been fighting for the Gonski funding, and no one will agree with the other one when they're in opposition.
I think it's got something to do with the name. I mean, something other than Gonski. Needs something with a bit more.
About going Gonski.
Needs something with a better core brand proposition.
Right.
That's all I got.
I got one final story. Do you have a final story, Dean?
That was my final story.
My final story. I'm going to stand up because it's momentous.
Well, hey,
This week in Germany.
you know what makes good radio? You standing up.
Yeah, well, that's why I announced I was standing up, so people can appreciate the gravitas of this story I'm about to present,
Franco
which
is
I don't really
standing.
have a lot of details or information on. But it's worth mentioning. We touched on the base of what Australia is doing so far in regards to same-sex marriage, which is not a lot. As I've stated before, I don't have a horse in this race, so it doesn't bother me either way. But my position is, why deny someone something that doesn't affect me in any way, shape or form, or deny rights to minorities in general? totally
Yeah.
against it. Germany have legalized same-sex marriage, or they've legislated for it. There's been a bill floating around for 4 years, which the conservative elements of Angela Merkel's Christian Democrats or
Christian
Liberal,
Democrats.
the Christian Democrats Party have staunchly been opposed to. But this week, she did a backflip and allowed a conscience vote, and like that, bill passed. She voted no, even though she allowed for a conscience vote. She said for various reasons she didn't believe in same-sex marriage because of her Christian values, blah blah blah. But she allowed for a conscience vote.
The thing is that this shits me about people that go because of my Christian values. You're elected to represent your electorate. I'm sorry, but on social issues, it's not your fucking opinion that matters. It's what is like you've got to represent, and overwhelmingly, the electorates support this.
The whole idea that I think you elect someone, they vote their conscience. The fact that they're incredibly wrong on it is a problem. But I don't think like the whole idea within a democracy, you don't just go back and say, hey, what is my electorate? If you want to get re-elected, you should be conscious of what your electorate wants. Yeah, that's politics. But you don't necessarily let that control you. Like if you're in a massively heavily Christian sort of area, and I would still say you need to vote to allow same-sex marriage.
No, we're on the same page.
Yeah,
I think either you allow same-sex marriage or you don't allow marriage. I'm fine with it. If you want to, like get rid of marriage from some people, get rid of everyone.
I remember reading an article somewhere, and someone said the only legitimate argument against same-sex marriage is an argument against marriage altogether.
Yeah,
said, hey, maybe marriage isn't the best thing to be doing, and no one should be allowed to get married.
Yeah, maybe there should be no tax concessions for married couples. Maybe there shouldn't.
Yeah,
I don't know.
So well done Germany on. It's amazing, it just happened so quickly.
I got another story. Nevada legalized marijuana.
Did they?
Not just medical,
recreational
as well.
How did they get that past the Trump? Trump world, even
though
it's a state.
It's a state decision. Yeah.
Technically, it's still illegal federally.
Yeah, but Nevada now, including Las Vegas, City of Sin, is now you can just go buy marijuana at a dispensary and it's fine. Don't even need to lie about having a medical.
I wonder how quickly it would take for marijuana shops to start up if it was suddenly legalized in WA. How long would it take just before people were taking advantage of that situation?
It wouldn't be long. You remember that they used to have that artificial marijuana that was technically sort of illegal?
Yeah, that
sort of legal
rather.
That ramped up quick.
Yeah.
I
don't know how that stuff was being made though, and I'd probably be horrified to know.
I don't think you want to know.
It was concerning.
But I imagine the same thing. But it's good to see that America's still making progress on this issue. We're not here locally. People don't have the right to decide what they do with their bodies necessarily in all circumstances, but we'll get there when America tells us it's okay.
Well, apparently, though, we don't always take our cues from the rest of the world. America legalized same-sex marriage, but we're still sort of dragging our heels on that one.
This is true. I imagine that's the old guard in the coalition that needs to go away.
Yeah.
Die.
And at the moment...
They need to die.
Because they've got that razor-thin margin, all it takes is for one or two of them to just be like, no, fuck it, we're out.
Yeah, and it'll turn pretty suddenly, I imagine, at some point. It's said there'll be a generational change.
It doesn't seem like the Christian thing to do, to preach hatred towards people. That doesn't... Heavy J wasn't about that. Not once in the New Testament does he say anything about stoning the gays. That shit's in fucking Leviticus and Deuteronomy, and that book, they're crazy books.
Do you think Merkel's decision will put pressure on Turnbull, or is
no
too far removed?
Look, I don't think he's in a position to do anything about it. He's on board. I think he's come out before and said he would be in favour of a conscience vote, but he just can't. I think this is one of those votes where, as much as I hate to give Malcolm Turnbull credit for things, I don't think he can do it. Yeah. I just think he's like... And Christopher Pine obviously thought he could make it happen, and that did not go well. Like, once people found out that he was talking like that, they got him down. So I don't think we'll see any action from Malcolm on this.
Do you think the views of the conservative element of the Liberal Party is reflected within the majority of their base?
No. So
you think they're out of touch with their base?
There have been surveys done, and it was the overwhelming majority of Anglicans support same-sex marriage if it becomes law, And I think, and whatever the third largest denomination of Christians is, it might be Protestants. Church of England maybe is the third largest in Australia. Same story. They were like, yeah, no, we're either for it or in favour of it if it becomes law. And even with Catholics, it wasn't that unpopular.
I think if you
It wasn't an overwhelming majority.
It's
But
not something that a lot of people vote on against anymore, is it? It's like,
well, yeah, that's my question. Rather than framing it as who supports it, why don't you frame it as who's against it? Because when you say support, it doesn't include people who just don't care.
yeah.
If you frame it as who's against it, I think that's a very small. Well, I wouldn't say small, but it's far outweighed by the conglomerate of those who don't give a shit and those that support it combined.
Yeah. I mean, I imagine this will, in sort of 50 years' time, people will look back on this and this will be much like segregation was. They'll be like, I can't believe it took so fucking long for you to agree that everyone can just use the same bathroom or the same marriage.
It's even worse because unlike segregation, where there was some financial benefits or something to certain sectors of there's no advantage to anyone to even holding this back. You know what I mean? I'm with you. There's no advantage to it. It's the weirdest thing that people are just so passionate about making sure that nobody gets.
Yeah, and for something that bears no effect on them.
Yeah, it's weird.
Absolutely none. The logic makes no sense.
Yeah, look, I don't understand it. I don't even understand why certain government ministers are so opposed to it. I mean, Corey's weird, but beyond
he's
Corey,
strange.
But he left the party, so beyond Corey, I don't get it.
You know how there's the axiom that I can't remember the exact phrase, but traveling expands your mind. He travelled and his mind contracted from what he saw in the world.
Yeah,
oh, wow.
Because he's quite well travelled.
Yep,
he's been to some of the more interesting places in the world. Did a fair bit of travelling in the Muslim and Middle East,
and
he
just
came
basically
back with
got
less of a
frightened
mind.
everywhere he went.
Yeah, pretty much.
Now he's come back to Australia for shelter.
yeah.
He's going to turn to his own personal anti-gay bunker.
Oh, geez, I get great joy
No
and
gays.
frustration reading his blog.
It concerns me how many people read his blog.
He's turned the comments off though. You're not allowed to comment anymore on the Corey blog.
So what's the point of going to them now?
Every time I read the comments on there, they were overwhelmingly positive, though.
Yeah.
It was like reading the comments on news.com.au or something. It was just like, oh my God, people out there hold this opinion. How ill-informed are they?
Because they don't watch the BAP. That's why.
You can't watch the BAP, Jason. You listen to it. It's an audio medium.
We've got a picture there. They can see it.
It's not the most interesting show to watch. Put it on silent and you'll just see. Do you enjoy it just from the picture? Actually, we did that earlier today with our first broadcast. Put it on silent.
That's right.
This is something we have debated as whether we would get a camera for the bat room now that it is getting a bit more of a presence.
I think we need a round table if we do that.
We can sort up a table here in the middle of the leather-bound chairs.
Okay. Well, we'll see what we'll see.
Oh, I'm out.
I'm done.
I'm done.
Thanks for listening, Australia.
Good night.
Next week.